What's up YouTube, American Prepper here, and today is a video about prepping for those who live in apartments in the city. I'm going to be going over 25 tips for apartment preppers. Let's get right into it. Number 1, invest in a good storage system. Make sure you maximize the space by really decking out your storage system. It'll cost quite a bit to do this at first, but in the long run it will be worthwhile. Considering space is a premium, you want to be able to access what you've stockpiled quickly and easily when there's an emergency. Grow herbs inside. So I have a balcony at my place, and I can grow some stuff outside on the balcony, and then there's also some herbs that my girlfriend grows inside. You may not be able to have a full prepper garden, but at least you can still have herbs around the house. And they will make meal times nicer. And in case you have to eat some canned foods over and over again, it may spice it up a little bit. Don't pass on having a toolkit. You may not think you need many tools because you live in an apartment. You'd be surprised what comes in handy when you haven't got it. Keeping a well-stocked toolkit is important, and everyone should have, even if they're not in a house. Reinforce security. This means better locks on doors, new windows, even if they're not up to spec. Just altogether making your home as difficult to get into as possible. Sorry, by the way, my she's got a squeaky toy and she's just squeaking away. Gracie, shh. Know your fire plan. Don't just make a fire plan. Mentally make sure you remind yourself and verbally remind anyone else you live with of what to do if a fire happens regularly. Have fire blankets and fire extinguishers everywhere that makes sense. Don't just assume the fire will start in the kitchen. And in my apartment, we do have a sprinkler system, which is kind of nice, but if that fails, it doesn't hurt to have a fire extinguisher. Just have one handy in the kitchen or somewhere around the house. If you live far up, have a plan from getting out of the windows. Now, that's kind of a tricky one. I live on the 3rd floor, so it's high enough where it could be dangerous, but I don't know. If you live in a high-rise apartment building where it's 20 floors up, I don't really have any good ideas for that other than a fire escape or maybe a ladder. I mean, if you have some better ideas in the comments, I'd like to hear them. While you may not have access to space for many books, keep hard copies of a few valuable ones. Hard copies is important. Digital books are nice, but if the grid goes down, it'll be nice to have some hard copy survival books. Don't forget to stockpile water. When the faucets turn off and the power goes out and the pumps can't run anymore, then don't forget to stockpile water, bottled water. You may never know when the water line in your apartment might get cut off. It's just so important to have a backup and a backup to a backup. And you can even collect rainwater in a container, and that could be handy in a small emergency, even just to wash your hands with. If you're in a place where droughts happen and where you don't really get much precipitation, take stockpiling water even more seriously. It could be a nightmare on having to get hold of it when your building gets cut off. Keep blankets, loads of them. Power outages in apartments are not fun. You won't have access to be able to just have a generator and power your home that way. You can't just have a fire outside. You got to stay warm somehow. So blankets, and maybe they make these cool candles that give off quite a bit of heat. You could have those. You could barricade yourself and those you live with in a single room. That also would help. Be aware that a lot of winter prepper gear is also a fire hazard. Things like gas butane heaters are not advised for keeping and using in your apartment. Always look for safe alternatives. Into account limited space, airflow, and lack of easy escape routes. That being said, make sure you've got as many winter emergency supplies as you can. It's important to get a hold of every winter emergency supply you can use safely within your apartment. Hot water bottles, for example, amazingly useful considering when the power goes out. There's so many different things to do and so many different things to try and come up with. Concentrate on stockpiling items that have as many purposes as possible. Toilet paper over tissue paper. Tissue paper over paper towels. The more uses you can think of for an individual item, the more valuable it should be to get a hold of that item for your stockpile. It'll help you out in the long run to have these kinds of items around your apartment. Especially, it will help conserve space for the more important preps like storing water. Stockpile small, compact items where there are such versions of what you'd like, such as medicine, ibuprofen, Neosporin, a couple first aid kits. That would be great. It's important. You can't forget about the medical stuff, and for women, feminine hygiene products, all that kind of stuff is very important. Stockpile foods that have high calorie count for the amount of space they take up. Baked beans, cans of chili, powdered milk, and condensed soups are great. Stockpile as many foods as possible so that stockpile as many foods as possible that don't need to be cooked to be eaten. This is excellent when you have no electricity because as I've said before, starting a fire to get warm, or in this case cook, is not a good idea in an apartment. Canned fish, baked beans, they're not the most pleasant to eat, but they're better than going hungry. Stockpile foods you can cook simply by boiling. Number 18, be cautious about hiding your preps from neighbors. In a big apartment complex, I think I got in my apartment complex at least 200 people. You don't want to tell anyone about your preps. Loose lips sink ships. That's what I was always told. If you're friendly with your neighbors, great, but that doesn't mean you should be telling them about your preps and that you're a prepper. If you don't want them over in an emergency, don't tell them at all. Just be silent about that, because 300, 200 people, they might come knocking on your door first, which is kind of scary. Security is utmost important. It's good to be constantly assessing neighbors for whether or not they like you, their attitude towards you, or the visitors they bring home might eventually become security risks. Work on getting a bug-out location. In cases where you try to bug in, but the situation obviously becomes really bad, it becomes important that you can bug out as quickly as possible. And if you don't have a bug-out location, then I'm not sure what to tell you. Honestly, I guess I have a bug-out location, kind of, but it's still in the suburbs. It's with a friend of mine who's also a prepper, but as far as bugging out way out of the city, I don't have any options as far as that goes. I hope maybe someday. Consider having a second front door. We added a second front door to our apartment when we moved in, not only for sound insulation purposes, but for boosted security. That may not be allowed in your apartment complex, but we did it anyway, just because that's just what we wanted to do, and we can take it down when we move out and patch the holes in the wall. It creates a natural buffer between yourself and anyone in the building. And if someone does happen to get through the first door, what are the chances they're going to be, willing to go through a whole nother door? They'll be slowed down, or if not, completely give up. Make sure you invest in communication tools. If you're stuck in your building, it will become very important to have, some radios, a ham radio, whatever. Look into solar panels that you can hang from the window. We have this in place. Solar panels come in all shapes and sizes. Haven't got the ability to have solar panels on the roof. There's plenty you can hang out from the window. No, they won't give off as much electricity on the roof as ones on the roof will, but they're great absolute emergencies. You need to just keep something charged like your phone or your tablet. Don't forget to stockpile food and supplies for your pets. Luckily, the place I live in is pet friendly, so I got a good dog, and that really helps. But don't forget about pet food. Last but not least, you can't just, pop down to the garden to go to the bathroom. Make sure you have a plan for number 2, going number 2 and number 1. That's pretty important. Once the toilets don't work and the sewer system backs up, that can get pretty bad quick, especially with 200 people living in the building. Wet wipes will come especially in handy. I don't really have any ideas of how I dispose of waste. I mean, you can't just poop in a bucket and throw it over the porch. I mean, everyone did that, it'd be a mess. But there has to be some way that you guys have found. Maybe you guys and girls have more experience with that than me, but maybe you could do it in a plastic bag and, I don't know, take poop in a bin and take it outside. I have no idea. That's a really tough one for me. But with that being said, thank you for watching. This will be a full part series.